Hey everyone, again coming at you another movie review, and as you can tell from the title, this is an entry in Oscar reviews. Now I don't know what order these are going to be uploaded in. I don't know if I'll upload them in the order I record them, some random order or chronologically when the movies came out, but just letting you guys know, Oscar reviews. Now the film I'm reviewing today was nominated for multiple Academy Awards and only won one. It was nominated for Best Picture, Best Cinematography, Best Film Editing, Best Original Score, Best Sound, and Best Sound Editing, which I can say after watching the movie I can see why it got nominated for those. And it also was nominated and won Best Supporting Actor for one of the main characters, and of course the actor was Tommy Lee Jones. Is the 1993 thriller film based on the TV series from the 60s, I believe, of the same name.
The Fugitive. Now, I know I was planning on doing this last year, but I ran out of time. And this is the first time I've watched this movie entirely. Now, I've been aware of this movie for a while, even before I got this. I mean, when I was in cinema as a literature, we watched a movie during our comedy one that was a spoof of this movie, the Leslie Nielsen comedy Wrongfully Accused, which I can say this movie's mild better than the spoof is, but I noticed a lot of the stuff they made fun of. And this is a very popular film. It has a 7.8 on IMDb, and on Rotten Tomatoes it has an 82% with the audience and 94 critics. And this is what they have to say about it. Exhilarating and intense, this high-impact chase thriller is a model of top and efficient formula filmmaking, and it features Harrison Ford as at his fantastic best. I will say that's true, because Ford does do a good performance, which I will talk about in a bit. Anyway, the movie is directed by Andrew Davis, which I'm going to see what else he's directed. Before this, he directed Under Siege. At the end of the 90s, he directed A Perfect Murder. Then in the 2000s, he directed Collateral Damage, The Guardian, Holes. His first movie was a movie called Stony Island. In the 80s, he directed Code of Silence, Above the Law, The Package, Final Terror, among others. Based on that, I have to just on what I know, I've never really heard of those other films. Under Siege, I've sort of heard of. I have to say this is probably his most well-known film, at least based on what I see. Too bad he wasn't nominated for Best Director, because I think he did a good job. Now, the plot of the movie is that our main character is Dr. Richard Kimble, played by Harrison Ford. He's a successful vascular surgeon in Chicago, Illinois. He comes home one night to discover his wife, Helen, has been fatally wounded, and he has a struggle with a man who he sees has one arm. And even though he attempts to subdue him, the man escapes. And after he's questioned by the police, they tell him that there's a lack of evidence of a break-in, and since there's basically no other prints besides theirs, and there's not really much evidence of a struggle, he's the last person who saw her, so basically all the evidence points to him. And since he's also the beneficiary of his wife's life insurance policy, that combined with a misunderstood 911 call that Helen made, which we the audience see it's a misunderstanding, but the people in the film don't. But that's the benefit of us being the audience. Kimble is tried and convicted of first-degree murder, and he is sentenced to death. Now, on his way to death row via a bus, the other prisoners attempt to escape that wounds a guard and kills a driver, and it causes the bus to crash into the path of an oncoming train. And Kimble barely manages to escape the bus's destruction, at the same time saving the life of a guard, and he flees into the night. Now, Deputy U.S. Marshal Samuel Gerard, played by Tommy Lee Jones, is assigned the case, and him and his team arrive, and basically the movie is them trying to find him. And at the same time, Kimble is trying to get away from them, of course, at first, and then he's trying to, when he gets back to Chicago, he's trying to prove his innocence, fighting the one-armed man who killed his wife, and prove to everyone he didn't do it. And of course, the Marshal's still trying to find him, and then of course, eventually, the U.S. Marshals see that there might be some truth to Kimble's claim, so they start to look into it with him, and it comes into a good climax. Which I will say that I kind of, early on in the film, I kind of suspected what was going to happen in the climax. How it happened, I didn't really suspect until later in the movie, but what the basic premise of what was going to happen, I did suspect early on. And I will say, if you're not really a fan of conspiracies in movies, you probably won't enjoy the ending, but I didn't mind it for what it was. I thought it was an interesting climax. And I was really interested in the story, and
I thought the movie was well paced, which is why I'm surprised Andrew Davis wasn't nominated for Best Director, because he paced the film pretty well, I thought. It's a little bit over 2 hours, and it's not a 2-hour film that dragged. I have to say, if this movie was shown in theaters again, even though I have the VHS, I would gladly go and see this movie in the theater just to see this film with an audience. And to see how this film would have looked on the big screen, because there was a lot of things in this film I noticed that would have looked cool on the big screen, like the train crashing into the bus probably looked excellent on the big screen and probably sounded cool with the big speakers. The scene where Harrison Ford jumps off the dam probably would have looked cool on the big screen. Now, the score for the movie was done by James Newton Howard. Like I mentioned before, he did get an Oscar nomination for it, which I'm going to check real quick to see what films this movie lost to, and also see who Tommy Lee Jones beat out. Okay, it lost Best Picture to Schindler's List. Okay, here's who Tommy Lee Jones beat out for his Best Supporting Actor nomination. He beat out Leonardo DiCaprio for What's Eating Gilbert Grape, Ralph Fiennes for Schindler's List, John Malkovich for In the Line of Fire, and Pete Postlethwaite for In the Name of the Father. Let's see. Schindler's List beat it for the original score, wasn't nominated for original song. Jurassic Park beat it over for sound editing, which another film also nominated in that category was Cliffhanger, as well as Best Sound Mixing. Jurassic Park also beat them out in it. Another nominee, ironically, for that film. That one was Schindler's List. That's kind of funny. Spielberg had double chance of having his film win. Schindler's List once again beat out it for Best Cinematography. No, it wasn't nominated for that one. Schindler's List once again won for Best Film Editing. Other nominations were In the Name of the Father, The Piano, and In the Line of Fire. And that's about it. Which I could see why it lost all those ones, because Schindler's List and Jurassic Park, for me, I like them. Which film do I like better? Actually, I haven't watched Schindler's List in a while, so I can't really say which one of those two films I like. I could say that I could see why The Fugitive was nominated for him. It's a great film. Didn't really need a sequel, even though it did get one in the film U.S. Marshals, which I know that critics, as you can tell, universally praised this one, but they were mixed or hated the sequel, which I'm going to wait and see, because I hear the acting in it is good, which, no surprise, it still has Tommy Lee Jones in it, and also Wesley Snipes playing a character that's wrongfully accused like Harrison Ford is. Now, the acting in the movie, Harrison Ford was great as Dr. Richard Kimble, perfectly cast for a role like this, and he did a brilliant acting performance. And I'm actually kind of surprised with how universally praised this film was that he at least didn't get nominated for Best Actor. But you know, some of the Academy Awards do have some political BS behind the scenes, so probably something to do with that. Tommy Lee Jones, though, was great as Deputy U.S. Marshal Samuel Gerard. And I have to say, he did deserve the Academy Award he won for this performance. And I can see why it was Best Supporting Actor, because he's only in like a handful of scenes. And he did a pretty good job, I thought. And even though they only see each other a couple times in the movie, the tense chemistry that Ford and Jones had, I liked. Like when we first see them. I didn't kill my wife. I don't care. It's just the way that he says it and stuff. And I just do like how the scene where they first meet is kind of shot. Lost his gun. Always have a backup. Even though she's only in a couple of scenes and we see him mostly through flashbacks. Celia Ward as Richard's wife Helen, I thought did a good job for the few scenes he's in. Jerome Crabb as Dr. Charles Nichols, I thought he did a good job. Now, I don't want to say anything that will spoil anything about the character, but let's just say that I had my suspicions about him, and they started to turn out to be right. That's all I'm going to say about it, because it's a big spoiler for the end of the movie that I don't want to give. But he did a very good job. Andreas Katsoulas as Frederick Sykes, a.k.a. the One-Armed Man. I thought he did a good job. And all throughout the movie, I was wondering when Kimble was going to find the One-Armed Man and get him, and the one thing I will say is that when we see the flashbacks of his struggle with the One-Armed Man, we see the One-Armed Man's face, but it's like quickly, so you can't get a good look at him, but you can see kind of like how his hair is, how his facial features are a little. So when you later see him, you're like, yep, that's him. That's him. And all the tension and stuff building up to when we finally find out the one-armed man was, I have to say he didn't disappoint. I'll say one thing. Here's one thing I will give away, that Sykes is a former cop, so that explains how he's able to do the murder without leaving much fingerprints, which I kind of suspected that a cop was somehow involved, but I liked it. Then other characters, like we got actors such as Joe Pantoliano as one of the other deputy U.S. Marshals, and as well as Daniel Roebuck. I thought they did good jobs working under Tommy Lee Jones's character, as well as Tom Wood. And then we got Ron Dean as Detective Kelly. Did a pretty good job. Julianne Moore is in one scene as a Dr. Ann Eastman. She's a good job for the brief scene she's in. I recognize her right away. I'm like, hi, look, it's Julianne Moore. She's in this movie. Cool. And the driving force, of course, is Harrison Ford and Tommy Lee Jones. They're the best actors in the movie, and they basically drive the scenes they're in. And now, is there a MacGuffin in this thriller? I would say, if anything, probably the one-armed man is a MacGuffin, or at least the data about him, because he's basically the one driving the plot, basically, if you think about it, because Kimble's trying to find him out, and they're trying to follow Kimble, so they're following it all to an end. So if there's any MacGuffin, I'd say it'd be the one-armed man, and it's an important MacGuffin, as MacGuffin should be. The only other thing I think of would be a MacGuffin is something we find out at the end, because that technically drives the whole thing of the plot, but the audience doesn't know it, so there's probably two MacGuffins if you think about that. A subtle one, a secret one, and an open one, but that's just what it is. I don't know what else to say about the movie. It was an interesting plot, and even though it's one, I have to say, out of all the remakes based on TV shows, I have to say that I've seen, this is probably the better one, and this was during the first wave of them that they were doing. And I will say, if Hollywood wants to do remakes of TV shows, they need to take notes from this movie. They need to tell the story, tell either the same or a similar story, but do it in a way that works. Because from what I understand, the show was run over several seasons, and I did do a little research, and they did keep some of the same thing, like Kimble actually helping people because he's a doctor and stuff. And they kept that in the movie for a few scenes, but they made it make sense. Like one of the scenes, Kimble sees a kid that he looks, and they ask him to help him, and he's gonna take him to a room, and he takes him into the elevator and examines him and sees that he needs to be prepped for surgery, so it falsifies the document, so the kid gets put into surgery and saves his life. Then another one, he helps someone by telling him, oh, he got blah, 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 blah. And that's just a couple of them. There's, I think, one more or so. But they make sense in the context of how the scenes are set up. Like I said, Hollywood needs to take note if they keep doing it. They need to get a competent director. Davis for this film was a competent director. The score really helped the film. James Newton Howard was a beautiful score. Definitely deserved to be nominated for it. And they need to get actors that really fit the characters. I've never seen the TV show, but Ford was perfect as Kimble. I have to say, if I were to do a list of top 10, even though I haven't seen enough movies that fill a list, though, but if I were to do a list of top 10 Harrison Ford characters, of course, obviously, Han Solo and Indiana Jones would be on it, but Richard Kimble would also be on it, and probably after you see the movie, his character from Air Force One would probably be on it. I mean, you can't get better than a one-liner like, get off of my plane. You can't beat a one-liner like that. Which he doesn't really have one-liners in this movie because he's not really a character that would really say one-liners. But he does have a lot of good moments. Like the struggle on the train, I thought was an interesting moment. Kind of mini action sequence in the climax, I thought was very interesting. I don't know much else about Davis's other films, so I don't know if they have interesting ones. So hold on, I'm gonna check what Under Siege is because I've heard of it. I just don't remember if it's an action or a thriller. I know those of you who probably know about it are gonna be wanting to smack or strangle me right now. Oh, Seagal movie. That's why I heard of it. Yeah, I've been meaning to look at that one. But anyway, my rating for The Fugitive is 5 out of 5 because I don't really have any problems with it. I think this is a textbook thriller. Of course, if I were to do a list of textbook thrillers, this would probably be on it. Silence of the Lambs would be on it. North by Northwest would be on it, among others.